I would like to discuss about upcoming events. This channeled message may seem interesting to you, but allow yourself to have an open mind. There is so much to this universe, realms upon realms, dimensions upon dimensions, timelines upon timelines, that we can't possibly figure it out just through our single awareness. We must expand our awareness. We must tap into our intuition. We must relax into the mystery, the unknown, and experience a spiritual awakening in order to truly develop a mind that has a very full consciousness. So I've had dreams in 2020, particularly when I moved to California. Immediately, I kept seeing tsunamis. And my dreams are very prolific. I mean, it's one after the other, and it hasn't stopped. Last night I had one of a tsunami, and right before I woke up, it was like there was a tsunami coming, and people were running and trying to get to higher grounds, but we only had maybe about 5 minutes, and we couldn't see it, but we felt it. We knew it was coming. You can just feel that energy coming towards you, and you know you don't have time. And my dreams all have been different, but the theme of all of them has been about a tsunami's coming. I see the tsunami, and somehow I'm leading people to a safe place, or I'm helping people to, almost like I'm showing them, like waking them up, saying, hey, this thing's coming, we gotta go. Because in some of my dreams, it's like people can't see it coming, or that it's not predicted. You know, we think about the Weather Channel and how nowadays it seems like we can predict certain things, right? Many natural disasters, but this thing, I mean, it just comes out of nowhere. Almost like it was created artificially. And I know that we do have the technology to artificially create weather. But I've tried to go into my dreams and pinpoint where I'm at, what's around me, so I can recognize something, maybe a location, but I've not been able to, because they're all different. It's almost like if I, tried to pinpoint the locations, it would be everywhere. There would be a tsunami on all kinds of different continents. So there's not really location that I've seen, but I've definitely seen a sort of a tsunami that just comes out of nowhere that kind of has an artificial feel to me. It doesn't seem like it was naturally created. It's almost like it was scheduled to occur at a certain time and place. And it feels like it could be multiple places at once. So I don't know what's going on in the ocean when that happens, but it would have to be something very significant for it to hit multiple places. So, I would assume that maybe it's more in the Pacific, because once I moved to the Pacific, I have started having these dreams, but I wouldn't say that it's just here or just Pacific. When we think of like Japan or California, or, other places going up and down the Pacific coast. So when I kind of started to feel into this dream, I started to get all these kinds of messages about the hidden, right? There's things that are hidden that we can't access unless we use the sixth sense, right? There's things hidden, like when we kind of hear the news or watch certain things, or kind of things appear a certain way, but there's actually something hidden going on. So I was thinking about why, I live in the U.S., and I was thinking about why is the Capitol have like this building of this, I call a tower, but it's a wall, right, to protect the White House. And I was thinking about that being created right around, when Biden was entering into presidency. And, I was thinking about Donald Trump going to Texas and how Texas is going through a lot of difficulties that seem to be, again, it seems like an artificial thing, like it was scheduled or planned or somehow organized. And I think that, this technology I'm talking about, it's not necessarily human. It could have human involvement, human understanding, but some of this I feel like is extraterrestrial. Okay, I'm just going to be honest. As a lot of the, the weather changing and all these things, I feel like it could be an extraterrestrial technology that humans have an understanding or they've learned to understand. So, I was kind of going to Texas, and I did a channel message about 2-3 years ago that I deleted. I went through a phase of like deleting anything that was weird, which was like a lot, okay? Because I was like, this is weird. No, that's weird too. Like, just delete it, And it had to do about the U.S. splitting into two separate countries. And Texas was like the capital, okay? Was like the new capital to a new country in the U.S. And there would be basically two countries, and it would be basically facilitated by Texas, would be the founding father or the leader of this. And I feel that there are extraterrestrial groups, higher groups that know or can predict about the breaking of the state. I don't know necessarily what's going to trigger that. I feel like with the Biden and Donald Trump election thing, that definitely did agitate it. It definitely is. It was kind of, you can see Texas's response in other states as well, and you can kind of predict that further agitation could lead to the splitting, breaking away. And I also saw that Texas has a lot of guns. And the one thing about why they can't implement these things that they want to really bad is because of the guns. So they want to try to remove the guns, but they know that they have to be very gentle. If they do forceful too quick, too soon, they're going to get a real reaction that is going to be not good for them. Okay. But there's kind of like this whisper about like, buying guns has gone up, right? It's more expensive to get ammo and stuff, right? That's a sign. There's a thing about like the government wants to buy your guns, okay, to get rid of your guns. So that's a sign. And, there's all these kinds of, the U.S., we're pretty gunned up in many ways because we know our history and we know that we can't trust the world. We have to trust ourselves and our communities. So, that's been instilled in us basically in the creation of the USA and all the things that all kinds of groups had to go through. If you're Black, white, Asian, Hispanic, there's a lot of things that we've had to go through to where we are today. So I feel like the U.S. in many ways will not be participating in these kinds of agendas that may be kind of trying to be implemented very soon in the summer. One thing is like the vaccine. If you're for it or you're against it, I'm not really doing the pro or the anti-vaccine discussion. It's more so about the forcing it on people, okay? We're not going to let the government force it on us, because once we do that, then we can find ourselves in a situation where they force this thing. Now, what if they can force this thing and then that thing, okay? So I think we're not going to allow that. And we're seeing signs of people kind of protesting against this, about anything that's being forced into our body, forced into our kids, forced in even, there's a huge, I would call it radical type of changes that are kind of being organized or being discussed in the hidden. And it has a lot to do with control. Okay, and this is ancient. This has been going on for a while. This is not something that is new. And, when I went deeper, I kind of felt like there's a lot of, there's a lot of control wanting to have of Earth. Okay? It's like from different extraterrestrial groups. And, there's been a lot of Mother Gaia, I'll say, has been able to deflect and to rebuke and relinquish a lot of these controlling groups, okay, that want to organize and control the earth and humanity and these types of things. Mother Gaia's plan in general is to see humanity kind of reach the next golden age. But, there's a lot of interference with that, okay, and there's a lot of interference going on with that right now, okay? A lot of times when we look at our future, I kind of look at it from the perspective of like Cloud Atlas in the future stories, right? In the futuristic kind of storylines where, in a futuristic storyline, the planet is just so much technology. It's like a Tokyo playground, okay? What I imagine, Tokyo to be with their technology stuff. And it's just so much. And then in the storylines moving further into the future, there's a complete collapse and humans go back to like native people, right? And then they go to another planet, right? In the kind of Cloud Atlas storylines of past, present, future. And, I think writers are channelers in many regards, okay? And, again, there's different realms, different dimensions, different timelines, but I do feel like some writers are tapping into this stuff, especially visionary writers like the Cloud Atlas person. Very visionary work, Cloud Atlas, very visionary. So I think that we have a possibility to get into a futuristic timeline, maybe 3,000 years from now, where we have so much technology and it's like we don't even have grass, right? Or we don't even have trees. We have artificial like air that is created through some kind of pumping machine or something, right? And that humanity is overpopulated, right? And therefore we're kind of in this struggle with energy, right? But it's all false. Like it's not real. Like it's like there is no struggle for energy. It's just we have allowed this AI or this robotic thing to come in and kind of, take away the natural energy or like continue to create a power struggle with it, right? So it's like, I think right now we are hopefully wanting to learn our lessons from the past. Even, I'm not just talking about past 5,000 years. I'm talking about past as in a cycle of at least 100,000 years, a span of time. And then before that, we were different. There was different type of things going on this planet. Okay, but at least, we've been through this planetary progression, which consists of 26,000 years, multiple times. We're not just 5,000 years and then we're cavemen, 50,000 years ago. I feel like there's periods of times where we rise, we collapse, right? Where we're advanced and then we're completely primitive again. Or there's different types of species of humans, engineered, created, experimentated, right? But overall, like the human that we are and this incarnation that we're having here is more so associated with more of an advanced, civilization, especially people born, here now. We most likely have experienced an advanced civilization somewhere in time and space. So we're not, we're familiar. A lot of us can be familiar to this time. And then some of us have, no idea. Or we're just living in this dark, darkness, not even like looking around and paying attention. So I think that, there is a, agenda for, globalization, globalization, which is like one leadership. And I think this is, again, another control thing. And then we talk about, 2030 event, which is about trying to get control over resources and people, and determine like how much they eat, what they can buy, land, crops. That's already happening. There's several elite people who are buying a bunch of land in different countries, trying to take that land away from people, average civilians, and kind of trying to get it like an ownership over this mass land for food. And real estate, to be able to control certain real estate, all these type of things is giving way to this 2030, and that's really soon. And I kind of felt like, we know that there's kind of uprisings in certain areas, countries, but in the US, Canada, even already South America, further there will be some kind of uprisings about sort of breaking down a system that may want to control. And it's very old. It's been around for some time. I kind of call it Martian. I kind of call it like a Martian type of system. It was created by the Martians. And if you go into like Roman movies or like movies, patriarchal Egyptian movies, you're gonna see what that is. It's a slave system, honestly. And there's a certain all-powerful, and then there's really powerless people who just have no say, And, it's a very militant, very brutal, very keeping everybody in check system, which we have here on Earth, but it doesn't really support emotional and spiritual growth or, anything of that nature. And I think that we're trying to evolve beyond that, but we've been in that kind of system for a very long time. And we know a system on Atlantis, even ancient Egypt, before this Egypt I'm talking about, patriarchal, we've had a different system on this earth that was more evolutionary in the way that there was a lot of emotional and spiritual growth. And controlling of people was more natural. It wasn't through it wasn't through violence in the way of oppressing and suppressing, belittling and ridiculing people and putting people in their place in such almost like a hateful way, right? Or creating a hierarchical system of where there's people at the top and people at the bottom, and you can only cross through with wealth, right? But then anything that brought teachings of wealth was also removed as well. So it was like you didn't really have anything. So, in this more evolutionary system, I call it in the Martian control freak, system, there's a lot of teachings of wealth. There's a lot of teachings of the mind. There's a real sense of the sovereignty of the mind. But that's being challenged with the AI. And, being challenged with this future technology stuff that, we're not ready for, obviously, on Earth. I mean, clearly we're not ready for it. And we don't really need it. We don't really need it, as it's kind of shown to be like we need this thing, but we don't really need it as much as we think we do, or we've gotten used to kind of needing the next gadget or needing the next thing, So I think, there's two timelines we can take. There is the timeline of the technology stuff with the AI and the, whatever robot, or, you can see those type of sci-fi movies on your Netflix, and you can see, that type of future timeline is, it's a Martian control thing, I'll just say, right? It's a control, it's like a super control freak system, right? And it grays everybody out. Kind of like if you read the book, The Giver. Everybody's gray. Everybody takes a pill every day. And basically it grays your pineal gland. Okay, I'll just say that. And then you live in society. You live in your chosen pathway, right? If you're a doctor or a teacher or fireman, right? It's all kind of, preordained by your family or the, controllers of this somewhat video game. And you don't really have a sovereignty over your own mind. And you think that's a utopia society, right? I mean, there's no war, there's no friction, right? But it's coming from a place of, it's coming from a false place, right? It's not like real true reality, because these people are taking pills to just, they're being forced into it. So it's not real true human mastery. It's not true human like evolution, right? So that's kind of what closest thing that I see for our future, with especially, the giver, and they were taking a pill every day, right? To gray out their pineal gland so that they don't think differently. And, they wear all the same things. They have all the same thoughts. It's pretty, it's kind of this place of control, right? And anything that kind of wants to see beyond is considered, disobedient. And I think that's a futuristic way of looking, if we're like 2,000-3,000 years in the future, and we've created a lot of chaos due to our immaturity, emotionally and spiritually immaturity. And that's the thing, we have to mature. If we don't want to create a future of bombing people and just more of fighting and stuff like that, it's like we have to spiritually, emotionally mature. And I think that, with just a patriarchal society that has a real Martian control thing, and, it's going to be challenging. So I think that, I think some of these beings are called extraterrestrial, or humans, or governments, or the hidden. I think that they can predict, some of the possibilities for the future, right? In 2050 and stuff like that. And, we can talk about our collapses that are already happening, like economically, collapses with our uses of kind of energy, collapses in just systems of institution, education. I mean, that's completely collapsed in the U.S. I mean, education, institutional wise, like it's just really collapsed, for kids. A lot of states, it's just their education is just, I mean, like almost like, like bankrupt. Like there's just, and it's gone way far behind, far behind, and try to catch up and stuff like that. It's just, it's very difficult. So it's like, I think the tsunami that I see is like a symbolic thing about not only the wave of emotions, people are experiencing of this, energy, but it's also about, these significant drastic changes to come. And we have to, really decide to be strong and, really pay attention to like what we are doing, and, really try to think clearly, right? To listen to our intuition is the most significant thing we can do at this time, especially with moving. I'm talking about time as in moving the next 5-10 years, 20 years, and so on. And because the information stuff on the YouTube or Instagram or whatever that is, it's just going to get more convoluted, and it's going to get more scrambled and confusing. So it's like you gotta kind of get information directly from you, like your intuition, your common sense. If something looks off, like ask yourself the question, like, okay, why is there a wall around the Capitol, around the White House? Like, why are they doing that? Your common sense would say because they feel threatened by an uprising, right? Why is there certain areas like Texas being like seeming like targeted? Well, common sense. Well, based on Texas and their kind of decisions that they made, it's a possibility that they would want to break away. So it would make sense that maybe there would be a resistance to that, or something to kind of try to interfere with that, right? So all this is kind of like common sense. Is just thinking, right? It's like just kind of put two and two together, right? And common sense says it's likely, right? And common sense has a lot to do with like knowing the history, a lot of stuff that's going to be done is stuff that's already been done. It's not like a completely new strategy. It's a strategy that's probably been used by all different leaders throughout so many centuries, thousands of years. So it's not a new strategy that we have no idea. Like, it's pretty obvious, that these certain things that are going on, right? But I do feel with the control of the planet, like certain, I don't know, it just seems like certain extraterrestrial groups are having like, I don't know, wanting to control, or there's a lot going on, right? There's a lot of different groups wanting to have their 2 cents, or wanting to have their kind of access or to something, but it seems of wanting to have some kind of control over this earth. And I think that this earth in general, because of, thousands of years or so, even before the whole story of, our idea of like Adam and Eve within like the whole, Genesis story. And, I feel like this earth has been designed originally for human beings to be very sovereign. Now, we don't feel very sovereign because there has been interference. There has been groups of beings who've come to Earth, saw Earth as this sovereign place, was like, what is going on? Brought in their sort of distorted realities, brought their kind of systems to Earth, and Earth over time became what it is today. But I really see Earth in its original kind of organization or development or design to be more of a sovereign place. But in the last, I would say the last 30,000 years is definitely struggled with that. There's a real struggle. It's like the sovereign versus like the controlled. And there's like that's like the main battle I see. And it can be internal, it can be external, but that's the kind of main battle that I see, is like the sovereign, which is also, the liberated, the, thinking for themselves, intuition, being kind of free, we'll say, versus the control, which has to do with oppression, usually associated with removing of any knowledge, removing of wealth, and has to do, really with human beings being used, right? Used and abused, and that's what we know very much today in different places of the world. And I think our greatest evolutionary type of progress is not let's do technology, because we've been there, we've done that, we know how to do it, okay? Humans know how to do our technology stuff, the AI. We've been in there, done that. That's really not the thing, okay? It's like that's really not the thing. The real evolutionary kind of like progress, okay, is humanity's ability to evolve beyond past cycles that involve technology, is to have an emotional and spiritual maturity, is what I say. And, some people in the collective want to be controlled, and that's fine. They want the, whatever utopia society where you're drugged, okay? And you just live that life, right? And everything's good and nothing's really going on. And, and there will be places on this planet that are like that. But there also are going to be places that are going to be very, very colorful and free and, going to have a lot of different kind of energy, right? And people they're gaining wisdom and knowledge from within. So I think we've had both on this planet, and collectively we choose what we want to participate in. And I think it's based off of where we're at in our own, evolution, our spiritual and emotional growth and maturity. But I think ideally we don't really get to master ourselves and the humanness if we're controlled, if we're forced into things. We can't really master the mind, right? We can't for ourselves. If you're just drugged up, like, how are you going to master your mind? Because you're not even yourself. You're something else. So, this earth can become like a trap. That's the thing. If we do that, it can become like a trap, because if you don't even have mastery over your mind and you're letting something else control your mind, I mean, that you can just find yourself in a trap. So that's why we have to be careful about letting our minds be controlled, because we are a soul, regardless of whatever religion. We are a soul, and we have to be able to use our consciousness, use our mind to be able to not just navigate this earth. We need it to navigate the realms and dimensions and other planetary systems, because we're not just this earth, and we're not just here to reincarnate again and again and again and again and again on earth. That's not the soul. There's more to the soul than that. And the control of the mind has a lot to do with like trapping the soul. So we never really get to expand or awaken our consciousness into reality in the most, exceptional and expansive essence of it, right? We think of all the brilliant geniuses such as Einstein and Tesla, and the one thing they have in common, Pablo Picasso, Frida Kahlo, different poets or scientists or mathematicians. We think of like Ray Charles to Stephen Hawkins. They all are quite unique. And when I mean unique, it's like they're sort of, I wouldn't say weird, that kind of word, but when we think of weird, we're thinking of someone who's eclectic, someone who's, exotic or exceptionally like indifferent in the way they think. It's not average. It's not, they stand out. You know what I'm saying? When there's a lot of people who think and feel and do the same thing, and the group think, and these people stand out. It's like everyone's gray and then their color. You know what I'm saying? And I think there's something to being different in the mind, to not being controlled, that leads to the genius of the mind, to be able to really access your soul energy, which is associated with the knowledge of the universe. And the thing about the gray is the control is like, yeah, you gray out, but you don't get to experience that. You don't get to experience the real consciousness that's connected to the universe. So that's the downside. And that's where evolution for the human emotion and spirit, it doesn't go anywhere. We don't go anywhere, okay? We don't really develop. We don't evolve, right? It's like the same thing again and again, and then you wake up and it's like 500 years later, and that's problematic because you're suppressing all of that. You're not developing it. What happens? It atrophies. So you might as well become like cavemen, because when stuff really, hits the fan, you don't have the mind to be able to really problem solve in a complexity, because you're grayed out. Because most of the real problem solving is not just planetary, it's planetary and galactic. Requires an emotional and spiritual sort of awakening to really access the genius, to be able to really problem solve some of these, real, these real things that go beyond just our physical body and our physical life and our physical survival. So I think, with everything moving forward, a lot of elite groups, beings, we can call them Masons, Illuminati, whoever you power set were. You can call them anything. I don't really... There's going to be new groups, okay? And these groups I see, when I channel them, I see mostly white men. And I see mostly they've been starting since the medieval. They have a lot of spiritual scripts. They have a lot of wisdom that they've gained from Egypt and, Middle East and India. And, they definitely are like archaeologists. I'll just say that. They're very much like archaeologists. And when I kind of tap into their energy, I've always see them having like precious artifacts. Like they're collectors, and they've collected like Egyptian gold statues and like Roman artifacts or mystic tools used by the Persians, or even before that, like scripts that associate with Anunnaki in the Middle East, like massive like palette, or what I call palette of cuneiform that has like talks about the Anunnaki's technologies and tools and how they did things, and these beings, the organization, like worship these type of gods, we'll say, advanced beings, and they possess a lot of that knowledge, right? But they withhold it. They go and and you won't see this stuff in the museum because they don't want it to be in the museum, right? Because, as long as humans don't really emotionally, spiritually grow and mature, you can have control. You can be 20 steps ahead, right? And when humans don't know what they're doing, then you can seem as the God, and that's the whole power struggle is this whole dilemma about there's a God and we are lesser. So I think it's important for us to recognize that kind of theme that we've seen, for a long time about there's the God and then we're the lesser, and we have a relationship with the God that's quite, it's like we become powerless. It's like we give all our power to this thing that's the God, but then we don't realize that this God is actually not really a real God. It's like a fake. It's advanced. It's an advanced being, yeah, but it's no more advanced than what we have inside of us. It's just we haven't awakened it. We haven't developed. You're not going to tell a child who's 6 years old that, oh no, I'm your God because I'm 60. No, it's just the kid is not developed. You can't ask the 6-year-old to say, that, give all their power to the 6-year-old because supposedly the 6-year-old is the God because they are more advanced, because they have experience. All that these gods have is just they have experience. They're just like us. They're more evolved and they've had a lot more time on their hands to figure things out, right? So, that's the whole kind of dilemma, right? Is being in that gray, right? Where we give our power away. We give our power away. We think that this thing we're giving our power away to is actually going to be the end all thing and it's going to help us, but really it controls us in a way that we don't really grow. We don't mature, we don't grow, and then it becomes like a trap over time, right? So been there, done that. So I think moving forward, again, there is sort of, we can say opposing forces. I mean, it's been always kind of like that for some time about the Lucifer rebellion and the, mastery of the mind and the ascended masters. I mean, it's kind of been like that. But the one thing that is really true, I mean, the reality is that you have to turn on your Merkaba. You have to use your Merkaba to be able to master the mind. And you can't turn on the Merkaba without divine love and experience an expression of that. And divine love is not gray. It's not taking a drug, and that's love. Love is like an emotional and spiritual growth you have that brings maturity and empathy. And if you're grayed out and you're drugged out, you're not going to feel that. Right? So, the mastery of the mind really is a way for us to get out of possible future timelines where, yes, we may be controlled. Yes, we may let the technology kind of become, this superior thing or this God to us. But, over time, what happens is we don't have the mastery of the mind. We don't have that divine love, that compassion, that empathy within ourselves. And, we find ourselves just here on earth and not really growing. We may see externally growing the technology, but internally we have no idea. We have no idea about ourselves. And then we kind of just get comfortable with that, and then we just kind of think that's what we're supposed to do. So I think moving forward, there's a lot of healing going on. Mother Gaia is healing a lot of different groups of people. And people are going to start to take back their power, as they already have been doing. People are going to start to awaken to their authenticity, raise their consciousness, master the mind. And the opposing thing is the control. It's like but people it's going to become so obvious. We've been there, we've done that, we've seen this. It's like a strategy has been used again and again. It's just a matter of fact of not buying into so much fear. As a matter of fact, not giving too much energy away to this stuff. Use your energy, preserve your energy, and use it very wisely. Because there are new systems being created on Earth. We're getting more back to a Lumerian, but it's not just matriarchal. We're getting back to a harmony where we had more like Atlantis, somewhat moving into Egypt, but Egypt got really dark after a while, because there's just too many different, opposing rivalries, I will say. It's like the whole patriarchal vision of Egypt in the movies. It's like rivalries, fighting each other over who's the king, and it's never ended since the medieval period. Still going on, right? I'm talking about before that, Egypt, there was a golden age where there was a pretty good balance between masculine and feminine. That's where we had the most spiritual growth and development. The Egypt we think of today is lesser advanced, lesser evolved than the earlier time, right? Most of the Egyptians sort of went downhill. It went downhill. We think of like the pharaohs, and they just were building and building, but they were spiritually and emotionally going downhill, right? Yeah, they might be building these things, but they didn't really have the true technology that their ancestors' grandparents had. Yeah, they knew how to build and probably had diamond, laser, technology, but they didn't really know. They didn't know how to turn on the pyramids. They didn't know how to harness the water. I mean, they didn't know. They started even to lose real knowledge about the stars and astrology and, the realms and dimensions and, and, the real, how we really spiritually, emotionally grow and evolve has been more from a place of the Atlantis, early Egypt, where, we are in a creative collaboration with each other, more like tribes, like Native American, indigenous tribes, where we're not rivalries with each other. We're not just power. That comes from a Martian Anunnaki, kind of power, this obsession with my mighty power, and what a lot of spiritual scripts have taught, in the Bible and in other forms, is the spiritual power. Okay, a lot of it's like, God, Jesus, we think of Jesus Christ as basically a being who's teaching the spiritual power to men who are so much in their physical power, and they don't understand that they're so spiritually unevolved to the point where they're just stuck. They're not growing, right? And just creating chaos or just controlling everything, creating mountains of karma is just not going to lead anywhere. It's not going to lead anywhere, because you cannot move forward and progress unless you have compassion, and you can't fake it. You can't lie to yourself, because the karma is there, and karma is like a universal law that it doesn't just like school, like you can't just like cheat the tests and stuff like that, because it's you with you, it's you with your soul, and your soul, it doesn't, it has to progress through an evolution of this the emotional and spiritual. And then your mind starts to unlock and expand. You don't expand your mind purely with logic. Like I said, Ray Charles and Stephen Hawking and Tesla, Einstein, they were so logical, but they were so imaginative. Hearing like the ways Tesla would think, it's not normal. It's not a logical, like, pure logic. Like, it was very magical. It was very, like, whoa, like, you're looking at things in a way that's just so unique. It's like consciousness, right? In consciousness is like this ecstatic poetry. I see it as it's ecstatic poetry, but it also has real like scientific scientific info in it. It's like sacred geometry. It's like there's a real science to it, but it's like ecstatic poetry. It's like, wow, right? It's all kind of synchronicity and these type of things. So right now we're returning more to Atlantean understanding system that we've had. It's an earlier template that is before Martians and, stories of Anunnaki and even stories that we think of the Genesis with, the common, Adam and Eve. I mean, it's a different system. It's a different evolution that humanity's accessed and actually has been really good at. But in order for that, we have to break down these systems. We have to destroy some of them. And with that, we have to put in check whatever these forces are that, it's kind of like what you're doing, It's kind of like what you're doing because, I mean, this is a natural progress for us, In going against it, it's just kind of like, why go against the natural process? Because all it is going to do is you're going to wear yourself out, you're going to lose energy, you're going to create karma that's just going to keep you unevolved, And that's the thing where I think about these elites or Illuminatis or whatever, powers that were, or something like that, is, yes, we may have wisdom, but we don't have experience. We don't have authenticity. You can hoard and buy anything you want, but that's why there's so many of these elites that are searching for these, these particular bloodlines or these particular people who are like associated with like real lineages of wisdom, because they don't have it. They don't have the lineage. They have the hoarding. Yes, they built up the power because of their wisdom and their knowledge. But when you're sitting on Mountain of Karma, it's really hard to kind of, you can't really just like forget the Mountain of Karma, right? You can't just like ignore it, when it's attached to you and it's something of you, you can't really say that you're going to spiritually and emotionally grow in a way of compassion when all this karma you're sitting on. So I think, sometimes I wonder about like these, these opposing forces, right? I'm sure we all think about that, We can call it evil, Lucifer, rebellion, we can call it control freaks, false gods. I mean, there's so many, But I think the point is not to fear, to see what it is and see the amount of karma associated with it. And it's kind of like a trap, for these beings or entities or whatever. And, the best thing that we can do is just continue to be in our compassion, and that's what we really need. We need compassion and we need empathy, because that is how we're going to be able to bring checks and balances to our technology. If we gray out, drug out from whatever we're putting in our bodies, minds, we're not going to be able to really bring some safeguard to our technology and find ourselves even more heavy, right, in the mind with the technology that we're going to have or trying to have. A lot of the genius inside of us is very natural. It doesn't need technology, and it usually doesn't really, want technology. It wants more of the sacred geometry, which is the universal laws and knowledge of things, natural things. It's not so much about let's get this advanced technology spaceship thing and try to get somewhere. It's more so, it's easier, it's more natural to get there with your own mind than it is, let's get this thing to Jupiter. Just go in your own consciousness to Jupiter. And that's what a lot of the powers that were, they try to do, they want to do, but I mean, it's hard to do when you have mountains of karma that's keeping you bound to earth, You know what I'm saying? Because universal laws, you can't just, oh, okay, I create the amount of karma and just leave. And just, you always, that's the thing with the laws of the universe is, you always have to, you kind of have to neutralize. You have to return things to its most natural state within you and within whatever you've done to people or whatever it is. And because, the real core of the universe, Tesla talks about and other genius people is compassion and unconditional love. That's your center. That's, your real you, Because if the universe allowed things to just be distorted, the universe would be so junky and so polluted. It would just not exist. Everything must empty out. Everything must empty out and get, I call into this unconditional love place, or this, I just call compassion. I think the word compassion is one of the, the places that really is the place where everything starts to kind of come out of, right? Compassion for our pain and for other pain and things we're going through and the release and the healing, and then, compassion for all the experiences we go through that bring up hate and we really get far away from ourselves and create all this chaos and madness. And how do we bring it back? How do we be authentic again? Is compassion, And the kind of opposite of compassion is like what we see, the real, self that is so set. It's so like controlled, or there's so much judgment in that self, or there's so much seriousness, there's so much battle and rivalry with self that you can't really progress. Okay, so we have to think about our progress, as human beings. And I think, our world is shaky, but our world has always been shaky, because it's a planet, it's a life, it's a life force, and it needs to go through its things. Like kids go through tantrums, it's a part of their process. But how we can minimize, the dramatic, even traumatizing events is the more that we spiritually, emotionally evolve and listen to our intuition, the less we are to find ourselves like a kid. When a kid is in an environment that is probably more nourishing and has more emotional and spiritual maturity and harmony, the kid probably won't even have tantrums, right? So, the best thing we can do is to be aware, of not just what's going on out there and what we're being told and what we see and, the opposing, but be aware of what's inside you, because sometimes it's in the hidden that you really start to see things. Like, for example, I think about, like, it's so obvious that we are going more into our light, our freedom, or, mastery of the mind, because of all the destruction in the way that things are breaking down, and that means the system is collapsing. And yes, we can see that as crises and crises and crises. And when things come out that is really like just seems like desperate to kind of get us down, it really shows that we are growing spiritually and emotionally, and that's wonderful. Because sometimes, think about desperation. People are desperate because they know they're not, it's like they know they're getting, they know that they, especially when this kind of context with these beings or whatever, it's like they know that we're waking up, and the desperation is like, crap, it's happening, and it's happening very quickly, and we gotta desperately just kind of do whatever to kind of just get them down, or get, just whatever, right? And sometimes I think about, like, in the U.S., we have a lot of this, African-American female type of propaganda that is belittling and derogatory and damaging. And I feel like it's just a desperate attempt to try to just, women are awakening. African-American particularly are very powerful, evidently, because of, trying to really bring down that kind of black woman, which seems really obvious, that very desperate to like stop the progress of growth that's happening, because we're becoming compassionate finally, you know. Before we were all at each other, you know, Native American, this, you, wow, witch, you white woman, witch of Salem, or, you know, we were way not in our compassion in some ways. Now we're starting to get back to our compassion. That's why we're progressing spiritually and emotionally and starting to wake up, right? And starting to see that many are kind of wanting to clear the pollution, the distortion of reality. Because when you're not in your compassion and you're in your whatever Lucifer rebellion stuff, you're very polluted, you're very distorted in the mind. You're distorting reality. You're not natural, right? And you have to kind of compensate with not being natural with trying to just control information and control is because you're not growing naturally. You know, you're not really authentically learning, right? From a place of compassion, which is where the real progress, you know, consciousness and the mind, all these things. So it's like, you know, we're seeing now, it doesn't matter, you know, I mean, guests who, you know, have all this money and stuff and have this influence and this control, but, you know, with the mind growing and progressing, because we're going back to compassion, it's like people are going to find ways to make money. Prosperity is going to not just be these, okay, people who've generations, maybe thousands of years of just sharing it only with their little group and their kids and stuff like that. People are figuring out just through their own consciousness, just through their own mind, about prosperity and how it works. And that's why there's such a creative explosion, a creative collaboration that, you know, people are trying to create and kind of share and put into real systematic changes in curriculums and programs and, you know, all these things. We're trying to input them, right, into the motherboard, which is like the main kind of earth grid system. And, you know, there are some places, some countries, if we look at the bigger picture, that are, you know, very in good progress. And there are some countries that are just really, you know, really going through a lot of karma, okay? And I think the places that go through a lot of karma, I think of like India and like China and Middle East and places in Africa, because these places are very ancient. And there's a lot of karma associated with these places. I mean, I'm not just talking about karma 5,000 years. I'm talking about karma, a lot of years. You know, I think about Cairo near the Giza pyramids, like right across the Nile, or, you know, think, to me it seems dried up. I don't know why, but it's like there's so much karma in that soil, you know? You can dig down and find just so much karma. History, you know, so much karma in things that have been happening, right? And that stuff has to be worked through. And sometimes when you're working through that karma, it's not pretty, right? It's not pretty. It's not attractive. It's not easy. But everything has to neutralize. And sometimes when you have mountains of karma, you know, there's a lot of things that have to be worked through. Okay, there's a lot of things that have to be worked through. And, you know, particularly these areas, you know, there's been karmas associated with control issues, power struggles, you know, about this patriarchal experience that we've all been in, right? Where, you know, we have these big kings and then have these powerless, hungry people. I mean, the Buddha talks about these starving people. You know, Buddha is like this, you know, comes from this very royal family like Yogi Bhajan, you know, and then comes into the streets and just sees, like, why are all these people homeless? Why are these people naked? Why are these people selling sex? Like, something is wrong with our system if we allowed it to get to, there's such high royal diamond people, and then there you go right outside your gate to your compound and it's just like people just in the streets, like just like looking barbarian, you know? So there's a weird kind of, you know, there's the powerful and the powerless that's been created. And, you know, that karma stuff, it has to be neutralized and it has to be worked through. And sometimes that working through, it's like, in hindsight, you know, it's gonna trigger some chaos, you know? It's gonna, maybe not now, but maybe 200 years from now, or 500 years from now, or maybe right now in some places. And I think, that it's important for us to have compassion for ourselves and what we're going through, whatever it is that we're going through. If we're fighting, if we're, a lot of people could be fighters, leaders, always a revolution. I mean, there's so many revolutions we've went through, and it's to deconstruct these systems that do not give progress, and it's been an ongoing thing throughout this patriarchal age that we're finally coming to a close with. But we still know, and a lot of, extraterrestrial beings such as Pleiadians and, deer beings, Lyran beings, various groups of even, reptilian, okay, that are, sovereign and have compassion, a very different energy than some others. They understand the community, and they understand the progress emotionally, spiritually we must have. And we can't do that drugged. We can't do that living in a virtual reality, stuck in our head, in all this polluted, distorted reality stuff. We're not going to be able to do that. So it's like there's a call to turn back to nature, to become authentic, to restore our compassion. And in doing so, through our practices of the mind mastery, we will be able to not only work through these karmas of the past and, all these, these power dilemmas and power struggles, mainly is what it is. Power dilemma, power struggle is like the main fight. But we're able to kind of go back to power within and stop trying to get the power over people or try to give our power away to people, or create externalized power in form of a god, and come back to the power within ourselves. And I think that's really why Tesla, Einstein, Frida Kahlo, Stephen Hawkins, even Ray Charles, why they were so creatively just awesome, because they had power within. They weren't in a power struggle. They definitely weren't in a power dilemma. They weren't giving their power away. They weren't worshiping this thing as almighty, powerful God. They were kind of just going inside themselves, and just using the natural power they have to just kind of connect to their own consciousness and see kind of, use their own energy to get somewhere, in their own mind, not necessarily externally. So most of the external stuff is not really the work we need to do. Let's be honest. It's not the external work we need to do. And that's why Tesla, Einstein were so genius, because they weren't really concerned with the external in the way that, we get so caught in these power struggles and dilemmas and power hoarding and whatever this is. Power of me versus you, or whatever that is. They didn't really participate in that. They knew that the real work is internally, is your power inside of you. Mastering the power within you. That's not in association with this God or with this power struggle, or that you are less, whatever, in the scale of power. It was about power within you, in a place of equality, in a place where everything is equal in the source of our, truth or authenticity. Everything is equal. It's just everything distorts and, becomes different and goes into its own karma stuff, and then the karma creates these things, and, but in the original, going back to who we are and the source of who we are, is compassion, where all that stuff dissolves, all that stuff empties out. We're in this perfect emptiness, this kind of non-existence, lack of nature, and that's when we become true nature. And that's when we really start to have the power within, and that power within makes us genius. We start to progress. Instead of, that power struggle, that power fighting that makes us like really drained and like karma upon karma and like repeating the same karma and like, not really growing and you're in the same external thing, you're drugged, you're forced to do this and you're doing this forever. And we start to grow and progress emotionally, spiritually, because we understand that it's not about if I can get this external thing to do what I want it to do, then I'll grow. It's I got to move the internal. Why go to Jupiter with a machine that's going to take so much time and energy and, lifetimes if I can just go in my mind? And people have done. They're real advanced psychics who have gone to Jupiter and have described Jupiter and its moons and its energy and even its exact sort of alchemical signature just in their mind. Just in their mind. And that's why a lot of beings like Martians or certain Greys or certain reptilians, they don't have that gift anymore. They have to use it through technology, or they have to use it through something else, some other source, because they don't have that compassion, So you can be the most advanced Lucifer rebellion and have all the knowledge of this thing and that thing, but if you don't have that compassion, it's like, the only thing you can do is just get a spaceship and go to Jupiter. While someone else who has a compassion could just do it in their mind. So it's energy costly, it's energy draining, really. And it's just not right. So the power within is where we are trying to go back to, and getting out of the power struggle is what we're trying to do. Okay, but there's karma on this earth, and this earth is, we have to neutralize this karma, so we have to work through our karma, and we have to learn from our mistakes and learn our life lessons and learn how to not only, like, work through the karma in a way of trying to, like, work through our karma in a way of, like, inputting higher energy into the karma, which is dharma, and, really recalibrating, resetting the whole thing of karma. But we also have to, restore back the compassion and go back into the power within ourselves, and then recreate external reality from the place of power within. That's the only way we're going to really get out of the power struggle. We have to recreate external reality, right, through our projection, by going into our internal power, right? But we can only do that if we go back into our compassion. Right? Because then if we're trying to do internal power, we have all this power struggle and this amount of karma. It's like you can't really, you have to work through that, you have to work through, because a lot of times we create our external reality in the way of this, real power struggles and power dilemmas and power shortages and power, whatever that is, feeling like, powerless and, having no control over your reality, or, no control of yourself and all that stuff. It really comes from a place of, like, not really having atrophied power within you, not really having it developed, not really having, never having experience of the power within, and also, not having the growth, right? Because when we, like, we create sometimes this external stuff that we really don't want, or, continuing karmas or whatever, is because we just don't have the growth, so we repeat the same things of our mother and our grandmothers because we don't have the growth, right? Because it's not an external thing. If I get this husband or get this thing, then then I'll somehow have growth. It's not external, it's that internal. It's like, I need to reclaim my power on behalf of all generations of women or men, and then I have to use that power that I'm reclaiming in developing through a practice of mastering the mind, which is a real awareness and intuitive gift that we really all have, to really work through the karmas and work from a perspective of higher energy, not from a perspective I'm in a real struggle or power dilemma with it, where it has power over me, a real higher energy. And I think that's how we've been able to neutralize certain things, events, and even certain timelines, or, even right now, right? This is a perfect time for us to kind of get back to that inner power, build it up, and the power struggle, the power dilemma, all this powerless and almighty power control, false gods. I mean, we had the real thing is to get into that your own intuition and to learn what that is and self-initiate yourself with that, because I'm telling you, all these elite groups, they still are looking for these lineages that have that real progress of compassion, real progress of the mind, because you can't master the mind just through power struggle. You don't master the mind through power struggle by just simply controlling your mind or controlling other people's mind to be less or more than yours or whatever. You actually have to empty out yourself. You have to return to your true nature. And that means if you're a Lucifer rebellion, that you can't do that. If you're full with all of this hate, judgment, this darkness, right? So as a shaman, what we would do is we when we experience these type of things that, fear, whatever, doubt, or telling us negative things about ourselves, we recognize, what, the source of who I am and the source of who this dark entity is compassion. This thing is distorted reality. And that's okay. Let me draw it back into compassion. Right? And that's all we have to do is draw it back into compassion. Whatever nightmares or terrorizing things this is distorted reality. Let me bring it back into compassion. That is the source of who it is, and that's the growth, and it's not progressing. That's why do we think those negative voices, they always say the same thing? It's like years of the same thing, because it's trapped in that. A real progress would have evolution. It wouldn't just be the same story. These Lucifer rebellion stuff is the same story. It's it never ends. It's the same struggle, the same power struggle from generation to generation. It's where is the progress? Because there is none. There's no compassion. Therefore, you can't master the mind. And therefore, you can't really awaken your talents and gifts, because you're not even emptying in the state of emptiness. You're not even in your inner power, your source energy. So how are you going to awaken your talents and gifts when, you are, sitting on a mountain of karma and you have no progress with it? There's no growth. There's no maturity. There's no awareness. There's no kind of bringing back your external stuff into an internal place of compassion. Whatever we think is external happening to us and forced on us and we're slave to this, we've all been there, we've all done that. And I think the real thing is going into that internal place, building up that power within, and people have done that and people die for that. And people go through a lot of struggle with that because of their karmas with that and that have been created and in, forces, that don't want the progress. And that's all we can do, In the end of the day, if we really want to have the mastery of our mind and be free of just being controlled, being in a power dilemma, being controlled and not knowing ourselves, but then also being really unfulfilled in the way that we don't even know the laws of the universe, but yet we are the universe, but we don't even know what it is. So I think this is kind of what we're working on mainly. We can talk about all the events that are happening and certain things, but because humans are awakening and people are progressing, it's predicting is not as easy timelines, because sometimes we're dissolving timelines that could be destructive really quickly. So you think this timeline's happening, but then it doesn't happen, because collectively people are dissolving it just through their choices to progress and to return to compassion and to move beyond the power struggle, right? And see the power within and dissolving timeline after timeline, but still, we get in the power struggle, the power dilemma, the power pain in the power, right? Other people have power over us, and we have pain in our power. Because we're caught in these karmas associated with power. So it's like returning to that compassion. People find themselves in completely awesome timelines that have to do with so much progress and so much like clearing of the karma that's happening instantly, very quickly for people. And, you know, a lot of ancestors, a lot of healers, a lot of leaders, teachers here in this dimension, higher dimensions, are also like helping us to restore the compassion in that inner power that's bringing so much progress to people internally that they're shifting their projection out on reality so quickly and finding so much synchronicities, so much opportunity, so many signs, so many just things that wouldn't happen before but are happening now because of the return to compassion and because of the internal power is being remembered and restored in neutralizing everything that seems externalized through just the internal like awakening to the real work of our time on earth, which is the intuition, the psychic, the awareness, the consciousness, whatever you want to call it. And because people are doing that and asking questions, common sense, it's like a lot is starting to shift, because it doesn't shift just through externally, just, you know, looking out and something, and it shifts through looking within. And people are doing that. And people are sharing that, and people's thinking is getting a lot more, I would say, expansive. People's thinking is becoming a lot more expansive, becoming expressive. It's in people's ecstatic poetry, which is their consciousness, is becoming a lot more like just naturally ecstatic. I would say naturally, not ecstatic, I would say naturally like exuberant, right? In a way of like high energy, in the way of like, you know, these young kids, they see BS. They see it for what it is. And more people are seeing BS. You know, they're seeing the mountain karma. They're seeing this power struggle. They're seeing like this distorted reality stuff. And some people are buying into it and just kind of, you know, they want to be in the gray and be drugged up and controlled. But then a lot of other people are able to shift their awareness and start to see an external kind of movement that is actually bringing like, you know, that's actually bringing progress to what we think of restoring the external back to the emptiness, right? Where the clearing of the karma, and depending on how thick the karma is on these regions, the heavy duty, you know, clearing is gonna bring up a lot of ways in which we haven't progressed. You know, we have to bring a lot of things back to compassion. We have to bring a lot of things back into a natural rhythm, right? Because in many ways, distorted reality has created so much of this power stuff, power struggle, and that all has to kind of, and some of it's very heavy, you know, and the heavier it is, the more difficult it will be for people to really, you know, have to work through that and clear out the knots and tangles in that. Because when we get back to the compassion, that's when we can progress in a way of like, we start to have, you know, we start to be more natural to the universe, right? Instead of just what we want and what we are, you know, what we've created just out of our karmic decisions. We start to get more into a higher energy, which is more of the Dharma signatures, right? Which is closer to a higher consciousness than just the karmic mountain of things that we do out of a non-progress with our internal shifting and awareness. So I'm going to leave you guys with these thoughts. And